Hello everybody, my name is Katie Palomar, and today I will be teaching you about the competence to testify, what it means, how courts decide if someone can testify, and some landmark cases that shape this standard. Do you think a person who is 6 years old or has schizophrenia should be able to testify within court? These are some of the questions that we'll be discussing today, as well as, the difficulties that judges do face when they have these types of situations in front of them. So what is competence? Competence is about whether or not somebody is legally allowed to be able to give their testimony within court. It doesn't mean that they're going to be a perfect witness, but it means that they need to be able to meet the basic requirements in order for them to be able to tell their story, tell what they heard, tell what they saw. Judges don't question every single witness. The only time this comes into concern is if the witness is a child, if they have a mental illness, or they might have struggles with memory or perception. A witness must be able to meet 4 requirements. It's observe, communicate, recall, and understand the truth. Psychologists and legal scholars have outlined these requirements to safeguard this practice. The witnesses have to be able to tell the difference between the truths and the lies and remember what happened and be able to explain it clearly. There are some special populations that a judge might want to look into it a little more, and that could be for children as well as individuals who have mental illness or disabilities. Children, it doesn't mean that they're automatically discounted. They usually are competent if they are able to meet that criteria that I mentioned before. A mental illness or disability, again, it doesn't mean that they're automatically disqualified because of that mental illness or disability. If they're able to answer those questions, then they are able to get up on that stand and share what took place. But just know, it does not automatically discount them and their experience and what took place. So the judges will make that call and verify if they are actually able to take the stand. For this, I wanted to include some case examples. Courts use case law to guide their decisions. So for this, we'll be discussing Wheeler versus the United States, and that was from 1859, the State versus Morrison from 1953, and the State versus Allen from 1967. For Wheeler versus United States, which was from 1895, this was a Supreme Court case. The issue was, can a 5-year-old actually testify? The ruling was age does not automatically make that child incompetent. Within the case, the defense for Wheeler argued that a 5-year-old child was far too young to testify. The Supreme Court said that age alone doesn't decide the competence, but the child just has to be able to understand the truth and be able to describe what happened. The individual, Wheeler, killed the boy's father, and he was asked to testify, and he was asked, do you know the difference between telling the lie and telling the truth? And he said yes, and he even said, if I lie, I could go to jail, so I'm going to tell the truth. So they were able to decide that, yes, he is competent enough to get on that stand and tell what actually happened. So why does Wheeler versus the U.S. from 1895, why does this matter today? Because of this helped kind of open the door, and this case opened the door for children to be able to testify against abuse and neglect. Courts were able then and now, be able to look at each child individually instead of using their age as a cutoff, saying, you know what, I don't know if you're fully telling the truth because you're 10 years old, and kids typically lie, so I'm not going to trust you on your allegation of abuse. No, that's not accurate. And because of cases like Wheeler versus the U.S., this helped give a voice to the voiceless. And, kids aren't all liars. It is something that kids do, but they learn. And with verifying their competence, you are able to say, you know what, yes, you can come up here and share what happened. So this was a very important case. And again, it's not perfect. Kids are, I'm sure there's many situations where there have been kids that haven't been heard, but I think this was a big step, especially for 1895. So here's another example. This one is from the State versus Morrison, 1953. This was a Washington Supreme Court. The issue, can somebody testify that has a mental illness? The ruling, mental illness does not automatically make somebody incompetent. In Morrison, the court had decided if a person previously had been declared insane, they could testify. They ruled that a mental illness diagnosis doesn't automatically disqualify someone. What matters is whether the person can tell the truth at the same time of the testimony. So why does this case matter? Well, it protects fairness. Mental illness does not automatically mean you are disqualified. Capacity at the time of the testimony is what matters. This case protects the fairness. If the courts dismiss testimony just because of a psychiatric history, many voices would be unheard. This case makes sure that competence is judged within that moment. And I think that it speaks volumes again, where, mental health, mental illness has always been taboo or shoved under the rug. You're automatically listed as you're crazy. Oh, don't listen to them, they're crazy. And that is such an archaic way of thinking. The word crazy I hate using, but that's the terminology that has been used for so long. So this case has shed light of saying, nope, not the case. We can listen to what people have to say, even if they may have had some struggles in the past, or even if they have struggles right now, they still could have witnessed something, and their voice matters. So this case is impactful, I think. Here's another example of a court case. This is State versus Allen, 1967. Where was this? Which was the Washington Supreme Court. The issue is, should a child be allowed to testify? The ruling, ability and intelligence does not equal the age. So for this one, in Allen, once again, the courts looked at a child as a witness. The ruling reinforced that it is not about the age. It is about whether the child is capable of observing, recalling, and having the ability to communicate truthfully. So here we are, giving the voice to the children and actually listening to them and hearing what they have to say. So why does Allen matter? Well, children are judged individually. Age does not mean that is the deciding factor. They need to have the ability to have recall and communication, which is the key. This matters because we are ensuring that children, even little ones, are capable of contributing to justice if they're able to communicate and understand the truth. And you'd be surprised as to how early on little ones are able to understand that concept.
Victims and their families may have to wait even longer to get justice in the Boulder King super shooting. Lawyers for Ahmad Al-Issa say their client isn't competent to stand trial. So we want to know, what exactly does that mean?
At the time of their court hearings, that they are not able to fully comprehend what is going on, or they're not able to necessarily assist in their own defense. Now, if somebody's not guilty by reason of insanity, what that means is at the time of the incident, they were so insane, essentially, that they didn't or couldn't fathom what they were doing.
Today, a judge ordering a mental competency evaluation. Al-Issa's incompetency claim is far from the only one we've seen here in Colorado. In fact, Lowe says you could argue it's a common defense method used in murder trials, like with the Planned Parenthood shooter, and most recently with Leticia Stout. However, it doesn't mean that they're free to go, though. Instead, they would spend their time in the state mental hospital.
The Planned Parenthood shooter, every 90 days, he's getting brought back to court to determine whether he's competent.
Colorado got rid of its death penalty, which means Al-Issa isn't delaying trial to try to extend his life like the Planned Parenthood shooter could have tried.
Here, it doesn't have that same effect because we don't have the death penalty. So somebody being raised, their competency being raised, means that they can stay in custody indefinitely. It's not like they're just going to be released.
But when will justice come, and are people who are deemed incompetent ever ruled competent to stand trial?
More often than not, they're able to be restored back to competency. The Planned Parenthood shooter's not restored back to competency yet, but there are a lot of times when people do get on the right medication.
So what does it mean to be I added a reflection question. Obviously, I'm not able to communicate with you guys. However, maybe you guys can just think about this on your own time. But the question is should everyone who meets the basic criteria be allowed to testify, or should courts have stricter limits? So just think about this. If maybe you are, what would you, if you were a judge, what would you look for that criteria? Would you focus more on the honesty, the memory, or the communication skills? So just something to ponder and think about. So in closing, what does competence equal? So don't forget, we have the 4 basics. We have the ability to observe, to recall, to communicate, and to understand the truth. So just because you are a child, or just because you may have a struggle with memory, or you may have a disability or a mental illness, does not mean that a person is not capable of getting on that stand to testify. It does not automatically mean that you are not capable of doing those things. So I hope I was able to teach you a little bit. Apologies, I have a cold and I have been fighting this for days, and it's the night before the project's due, so this is the best my voice is going to sound. Apologies again. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.